Lisa, would you like to share your screen or would you like me to?
And I'll go ahead and share my screen just a second.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. The best day of the week. This is a special advising session for international students in ECP. And Lisa just kicked off the call, and I am Melissa Hyde, the Director of International Students and Scholars. And so we're here to just give you some information that's kind of specific to you. And so what you can expect to hear in this workshop is what it means to be an F1 international student. We're going to tell you a little bit about F1 work authorizations, the different ways in which you can work in the US, so on-campus CPT and OPT. We're also going to talk a little bit about your programs and then have some questions. One thing that might be helpful is, and you can put it in the chat if that's easier, because I know we're a little short on time, which programs you're in. So that'll be helpful for Lisa and I just to kind of get, are you a MATC student? Are you oh my gosh, why can't I think of the word? Are you a psychology student? Are you educational leadership? Just what kind of student are you? That way that'll help us kind of, thank you. I see some of you already doing that. And then we'll have some questions at the end. One thing I would say is feel free, kind of after everyone says what program they're in, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And what I would say though is just don't put anything that's like really personal or super specific to you. That would be better to do either a drop-in advising or an ISS. But if it's something kind of generic and you don't mind other people reading it, feel free to put it in the chat if you have questions. And now I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Great. So we wanted to start off with just kind of what it means to be an international student. And particularly, we're talking about students in F1 status. And one of the things that's important to keep in mind as an international student in ECP is that there's two sets of rules to follow. So you'll have, ECP, your academic program will have rules that you'll need to follow, and that's important. And then in addition to those rules, you also have this set of rules to follow in order to maintain your F1 status while you're here. And this is really important to keep in mind because a lot of times I think, I guess an example of where we have a concern with this is that, students may go to like a faculty member, or professor with questions or concerns, which is great. But the professor doesn't necessarily know that you're an international student. And even if you, let them know that you are, they don't know all the rules that are applicable to you to maintain your F1 status. That's really where our office has that knowledge and information. So it's important to make sure that you reach out to our office directly for any questions related to maintaining your F1 status. And then we want to touch base on this too, like F1 status is a student status, not a work status. And so because of that, the main way that you're maintaining your F1 status is that you're enrolled full-time every term of the academic year. So that's the academic year is generally considered fall, winter, and spring quarter. However, if your program, for example, and this is an example of the two sets of rules, if your program requires you to be enrolled in the summer as well, then you would need to do that, even though that's not required for maintaining your F1 status. And then graduate students, hopefully everybody knows this, either because you're a current student or you attended the graduate ISW yesterday, that at least 8 units is the minimum requirement for maintaining your status as a graduate student. And then there are some allowances for employment, and we'll go into greater detail about these in a second. So on-campus employment, CPT and OPT are the options, and we'll talk about that in a second. It's really important, and this is, I think, one of the big reasons we wanted to have this workshop, to make sure that we're providing this information to you all, is because it's a really serious thing, because you're on a student visa, not a work visa, that any type of activity that you would do that would be considered work, that you would have the appropriate authorization for it. It can be really serious. Like, for example, as designated school officials, if our office or someone on our team becomes aware of a student engaged in unauthorized work, we're actually required to terminate the student's CVIS immigration record, and then the student has to immediately leave the US without a grace period. So it's really serious. Again, we're here to help. We want to make sure that you have the information about work authorizations, and you can always contact us via email or drop an advising if you have any questions beyond what we're covering today. So what's on-campus employment? The most straightforward example would be like a student working in the library, let's say. So you're working on campus, your paycheck is coming from Santa Clara University. There could be other situations where it still would be considered on-campus employment, even though your paycheck might not be coming directly from Santa Clara. So an example of that is the bookstore on campus. You're working on campus, you're providing direct student services, but your paycheck would be coming from a different company, from Barnes and Noble. That would still be considered on-campus employment. If you have any questions about like an opportunity that you have and you're not 100% sure if it would be considered on-campus employment, feel free to reach out to our office, and we can definitely have a conversation to help clarify that with you. And then while school's in session, you're allowed to work up to 19 hours a week. This is another example of the two sets of rules I mentioned. So for F1 status, the rules actually allow students to work up to 20 hours a week while school's in session. However, Santa Clara University, the Human Resources Department has this rule that anyone, all students, can work a maximum of 19 hours a week on campus while school's in session. So there's a difference in the set of rules, so everyone will need to follow the more conservative set of rules. In the summer, and then also during the break periods in between the academic terms, you can work full-time on campus. And then a social security number, or what we call an SSN, is required for anyone working in the US, and it's not tied to a specific job or employer. So you just get one for a lifetime. So if you already have an SSN, you're good to go. You can engage in on-campus employment. If you don't have an SSN yet, then you would, and you have an offer letter to work on campus, then you would email us the offer letter, or sometimes it's titled letter of intent to hire. And then we will issue you a letter of support and provide instructions for you to apply for the SSN. Okay, so I'm going to move on to CPT and OPT. So CPT stands for curricular practical training, and OPT stands for optional practical training. The main similarity here is like anything, either way, what you're doing needs to be directly related to your degree, to what you're studying. And then the rest is kind of, there are differences. So for CPT, it's an authorization that's given by our office while you're still studying, while you're still a student pursuing your degree, and it's tied to a specific employer. There's a form that we have on our CPT website that you fill out with your organization or company, and a faculty member from ECP, and then you submit it to our office, and then we provide the authorization with a pretty short turnaround time, a couple of business days, and it's authorized by academic term. So this would apply to the teaching practicum for Mat C students, and then the required practicum for counseling psychology students. And then if we have any counseling students or education leadership students, it would apply for doing like an optional internship or practicum. It may be called different. And so it's tied to an academic term. So that means even though, like for the teaching practicum, for example, we know you're going to be doing the practicum for a full academic year, you'll still apply for 3 different CPT authorizations, one for the fall term, one for the winter term, and one for the spring term. And the authorization shows up when we issue you a new I-20 that actually shows the CPT authorization on it. We'll go into a little bit more detail about that, about CPT in a second. OPT is different in that it's something you apply for to have up to 12 months of work authorization for after you graduate. It's not tied to a specific employer, so you can change jobs and you don't need to apply for a new authorization. It is a lengthier process. You submit an application to USCIS, and then generally we'll have to wait for a few months, and then they'll send you an authorization card. It's a EAD card, and it's about the size of like your student ID. So this is an overview of the CPT process at Santa Clara. We have CPT workshops. We'll have them throughout the year. And we also have a recording of a workshop on our CPT website, so you can watch that at any time. Making sure that you meet the eligibility requirements. So you'll obviously have to find a practical training opportunity. I know in some of your programs, the ECP school assists you with that. And then you'll need to be enrolled in the appropriate course. And we have on our CPT website a list of the applicable courses for each program. And that information was given by your school, by ECP. And then you'll complete this form that I mentioned earlier, which is the CPT cooperative agreement. You'll tell us your request for the authorization, and then within a couple of business days, you'll get your, we'll process it if everything looks good, and the authorization will be on the new I-20 that we send you. So that's an overview of the CPT process. And then looking at your options after you graduate, I'm just going to try to get everything up here. After you graduate, there's a 60-day grace period that you're given as an F1 student. And the 60 days is based on the start of that 60-day period is based on your program end date, which is usually the last day of finals for your last term. So the options that you have after you graduate are, you can apply for OPT, which if you're going to do that, you'll actually start that process a few months before you graduate. You can enroll in a higher degree program at Santa Clara, so a doctorate program, and or you can enroll in a new academic program at another school, and we can facilitate the transfer of your SEVIS immigration record from Santa Clara to that new school. You can file an application to change your immigration status with USCIS. That's not an option available to everybody, but you would consult an attorney about that if you wanted to see if that was an option for you. Or within the 60 days, you can depart the US. So these are the options that are available to you. There are no other ways that you can maintain lawful status in the US. And there aren't we got this question a lot more earlier in the pandemic, but there aren't any exceptions for this due to COVID. So now we'll get into OPT, which is a benefit, and allows your F1 status to continue. We mentioned earlier, it's not tied to a specific employer, so you don't have to have a job lined up already to apply. And you really should be starting that application process 3 to 4 months before you're going to be graduating. And similar to CPT, there's a lot more information that we go over in our OPT workshops and on our OPT website. We're just kind of giving you an overview today. Some of this we already covered, must be directly related to your degree, 12 months of authorization. And the EAD card was that card I mentioned that USCIS sends you, which is your work authorization, and it looks similar to your student ID card. And USCIS sends that, yeah. Okay. Why is it not letting me go forward? Let me escape and see if it will let me go forward this way. Okay. So who's eligible for OPT? If you're graduating and you're wanting to work or gain further experience related to your field, and you've been maintaining your F1 status, you have to have completed at least 3 consecutive quarters of full-time enrollment, which I think has never really been an issue because of that requirement to be fully enrolled every quarter. And then you'll complete the OPT application process. So this is an outline of the process. I've mentioned applying 3 to 4 months early before graduating. There's a bunch of documents and information that you'll need to gather, and then you make an appointment with our office. We review all your documents and issue you an I-20 that reflects that you're requesting OPT. And then you mail that to USCIS, and then wait a few months for USCIS to process it, and then they send you the authorization card, and you can engage then in practical training for up to 12 months. So I'm going to pass it back to Melissa to talk a little bit about some program specific planning advising.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. If your program is not listed here, do not feel bad. We still want to engage with you. We still love you. It's more that these 2 programs have some specific considerations we wanted to make sure to address. And part of the reason for this is we have, seen students who are maybe in a situation that isn't where they want to be, and it's too late. So not sure where everyone is in their program, but just wanted to bring up a couple of things. So we'll start with MATC. So just wanted to make sure, MATC students, that you think about credentialing and the importance of passing your exams. And you will have exams that are scheduled at different times throughout the year, and you can't just take it whenever you want. There's specific times that are set. And if you don't pass it, you would have to wait to retake it again. And so a challenge here could be, if you don't pass a test and you're waiting to take it again, you must be a full-time student while waiting to take those tests. So I think this isn't necessarily a bad thing, good thing, it's just a reality. And so thinking about how you're going to approach your time and scheduling these exams, and you probably know about them better than I do, to be honest. And so what I think is just making sure that you can complete these exams before your program ends. And then counseling psychology, and I know there was a lot of counseling psychology students on this call, and I think that this is really important. And I know Sarah is on this call. So Sarah, if I get this wrong, please help me out. But we really see 3 immigration options for counseling psychology students. And so I'm calling them speed it up, slow it down, or stay the course. And so basically, my understanding is a lot of domestic students structure their schedule so that at their last year, they are only doing their practicum. And international students cannot do that in the same way because of the minimum enrollment requirements. And so if you go the speeded up path, you would take all non-practicum courses before engaging in practicum. So that way in the final year, you can utilize what's called the thesis capstone option. So graduate students who are in a situation where they only have their thesis remaining or their capstone project are allowed to be enrolled in less than 8 units if that's all they have left. So if you overload during a couple terms and or take classes in the semester, or sorry, in the summer, you may able to front load your credits. That way in your last year, you are just doing practicum and it is legally allowable because you would be on the thesis capstone, like I'm going to call it a waiver. It's not a waiver, but the thesis capstone. And so when you're in that, you're still considered fully enrolled. So that's one option. The second option is to slow things down. Don't overload during the terms. Don't take summer courses unless you're required to. Take a minimum amount of courses, and then you would take a year longer than other students to complete the degree. But then at the end, you would again be in a situation where you only have your thesis capstone. You can do that thesis capstone authorization, and then you can just be doing practicum at the end. And then the third option is stay the course, take the classes that are generally outlined by your academic program. This means that you would have to take some non-practicum courses in your last year while you're doing your practicum, and that you would have to meet the 8-unit minimum unless you have less than 8 units remaining in a term. So that would probably be your final term. So those are kind of the 3 options that we see. The best advice I can give you right here, it's always important to check with your academic program. They're going to help you make a plan. But if you want to talk to us and verify, is this allowable from an immigration perspective, we're happy to do that. Even if you make your long-term plan, your 2 to 3 year plan, and want to come check it with us. I think this works. I think this is what you meant by speed it up, or I think this is what you meant by slow it down. Please feel free to do that. And then we can check that for you and make sure, yes, this will qualify from immigration perspective, or no, you'd have to change this to make it qualify. So feel free to ask questions about those. The other one I want to touch on here, and this is important. So if you're looking for licensure, which you may very well be, it is not possible to obtain licensure under F1 status alone. There is not a way between CPT and OPT to earn enough hours required by the state of California, and I think any other state in the US. H-1B sponsorship is possible, but it's highly unlikely. Typically, organizations are looking, if they're looking to sponsor someone, they're looking for someone who already has licensure. So we just want to put this out here. That way you're prepared. You know that if this is the path that you're looking for, that there may be some challenges for you there, and that you can't get the hours on F1 status. So with those things in mind, how can we help you? So Lisa mentioned this earlier, but we do have quite a few workshops throughout the year. We also have some events that are, what I'll say, more fun. This fall, especially if you're new or if you started last year online, we're doing some in-person tours, which would give you the opportunity to meet some of your classmates and other students at the university. For immigration things like CPT, OPT, we always hold workshops, and we do have recordings right now on the websites. Our website is a fabulous resource. I'm sure you've already engaged with it. If you want to engage with one of our advisors on our team, we ask that you either email us with a 2 business day response time, or that you schedule a drop-in, and the drop-in advising hours are down below. Right now for this term, we have drop-in on Mondays and Tuesdays from 2 to 4 and Wednesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 12. We also have some additional advising blocks that are either early morning or late evening. Very, very rarely we will change our advising schedule. Say there's an all university meeting or something like that. So there may be rare times where we don't have this schedule, but this is our general schedule. And then if none of the times that are available work for you, send us an email at iss@scu.edu and we can schedule an appointment. So and we also have social media. If you're on social media, our handles are scu.iss. Feel free to engage with us there as well. So I know we talked at you a lot. Are there any questions? And you can feel free to put it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask. I know we're a little over time, so if you need to leave, feel free to drop off the call. But just, is there anything we can help you with? Everyone's so quiet, chat's quiet. Well, Lisa and I will stay on the call a little bit. If you want to ask a question, you're more than welcome to. I hope you're excited for your term, whether it's your first term, your 15th term, no matter which one it is. And just know, like I said, that we're here to help. We know that ECP is a smaller group of international students with some really specialized needs. And that's part of the reason why we wanted to connect with you this morning. Because some of the programs have required practicums, that's just it's different than a lot of our other programs here at SCU. So know that we are here for you to support that. Okay, let's look at Sylvia's question. I was told we could only attend one online class. How did the university accommodate the rule last year when the shutdown was in effect? Oh, that is a great question, and I will try to answer it. So what I will say is the rules are slightly different this year than they were last year. So when last year, Santa Clara was considered primarily online or online for the fall specifically, and then some programs like ECP were considered primarily online for the entire year. So that meant continuing students who had already entered the US could be in all online classes due to the COVID related guidance from the government. New students were prevented from entering the US because they're required to be in in-person classes. So that was last year. This year, Santa Clara is considered in-person. So we are considering ourselves to be an in-person institution, even though there are a small number of online classes that are happening. And so because we are an in-person institution this year, all students, continuing students, new students, all students on an F1 visa are allowed to take no more than one online class to count towards their minimum number of units. I know that there were some classes that switched, that switched modality. So some classes were listed as in person, they've switched to online. My understanding is that Sarah Hayes and the faculty have been looking at that really closely, and they're working to switch any students that are impacted. So what I would say is if you have a question about a class, or if for some reason you now have 2 online classes, be sure to reach out to Sarah Hayes. And then you can also reach out to our office if you want to make sure your schedule is acceptable. Sylvia, does that answer your question? Okay, perfect. Yeah. So good to hear it. Any other questions? And what I will say too is after classes start, so right now there's in-person classes, hybrid classes, online. Hybrid count as in-person. If 3 weeks into the quarter, something happens and the school shuts down for 2 weeks or 3 days or whatever, that is not your fault. It will not impact your immigration status. Like that is a health and safety requirement. If the county tells us we have to close, we will close. But right now whatever your classes start the quarter at, that's what they're considered. In the future, CPSY might become STEM program. Yeah, no, that is a great question. And what I will say there is that is out of our control. The way programs are kind of structured and then classified happens based on what the curriculum is, which the faculty have control or design the curriculum. And then other officials at the institution, here it's the registrar's office, evaluate the curriculum and assign what's called a SIP code. You do not need to know what that is, but SIP codes are what determines if the program is STEM eligible or not. So I think for the counseling psychology program to become a STEM degree, it would probably have to change pretty significantly. And I don't know if the faculty have plans of changing the program. So I think it's definitely possible, and we've seen it with other programs at the institution, but it's really about what is the curriculum that's being covered, and then does that curriculum qualify for a STEM designation? So thanks, good question there. Any other questions? Lisa. You can feel free to unmute yourself, shout it out in the chat. We'll stay here for another couple of minutes. I don't know if Lisa. Can I work for a mental health company while studying? Yeah, so this I would say is a great question. Lisa, do you want to take this one? Or do you want me to keep rolling with it?
Sure, I can take this one. I think this person just entered the call, so I think they missed the when we covered this with CPT. So yeah, depending on which program you're in, you may either have like a required practicum to do something like this, or if you don't have a required practicum, you still your program should have a course that you can take that would allow you to apply for what we call optional CPT. So you could still do an internship or practicum related to the program that you're in and what you're studying in that program. And it would require CPT authorization, which is given by academic term. So even if you knew that you were going to have the internship with the mental health company for like 6 months, let's say, you would still, that would cover like 2 academic terms probably, right? So you would need to apply for CPT for both academic terms. Can I start that within my first year of enrollment? So one of the short answer is no. One of the main eligibility requirements for CPT is that you have to complete 1 consecutive year of full-time enrollment before you're eligible. So if you're a new F1 student, the earliest, and fall is your first term in F1 status this fall, then the earliest that you're going to be eligible for CPT would be this coming summer 2022.
Anything else? Thank you all so much for joining us. I cannot wait to meet you at some point during the term. If you were on the call yesterday, you heard this, but if not, we're going to continue to do Zoom advising for the fall term, just because we know that students are arriving, quarantining, some students are engaging in their vaccination process. We want to give everyone time to get that taken care of and feel safe. So we will be doing Zoom advising. Plus, we know that some students really like Zoom advising because then you don't have to come to campus if you don't have class that day. So please feel free to, do a drop-in Zoom call. If you have an emergency, we will have people in our office, which is in Varsity Hall. So if something does happen and it's an emergent need, there will be people available, but advising will be done online for the fall. And so I'm looking forward to seeing you in fall if that works out. If not, in the winter term, where we expect to return to in-person drop-in advising. Yeah, thank you all so much. Have an amazing weekend. I hope you have a fabulous school year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, Melissa.
Hi,
I have
Sylvia.
just one question. Yeah.
Sure.
So I think I finished the online course on Camino, but there's no sign saying that, okay, you finished 100% of it. So basically, I finished all the videos and the quizzes. Is that all?
Yeah. So I apologize. There's not like unless I go in and look at every single ones, I can't do it. So if you've done everything, you're done. And we're not like gonna go in and grade you and, so it's fine. It was really just for your personal benefit. And so thank you so much for doing it. And this year's kind of a pilot. In the future, we might like follow up with people who haven't done it, but for this year, we're just getting it out there. So thank you for doing it. If you had any questions from the course, let us know, but otherwise you were done. You're good to go.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you very much. And thank you for the introduction. Yeah, have a good day.
You too.
Bye.